And away we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today. We'll take a look at some clips from the news, share a little bit of dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And if you're listening anywhere else and you'd like to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. That's at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University on YouTube. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, as well as Rumble, Coffee Talk 2 on Rumble, as we get ready to jump off here. And naturally, I do read through as many of the comments as is reasonable. And so I will go ahead and say hello to some of the people that are chiming in so far. And I see that, who we got here? Helter has joined us here today, as well as Dragon, Brian, D'Lo, Bob, Eli, Cyberjack Sr., Tuck is here. He says, please do like, share, and subscribe on both channels. Please do. I sure could use it. Kimberly is here. Jesse, Frankie, and JJ from the Looney Bin. I think we're all in the Looney Bin. Rumble, Coffee Talk 2. You can't see me on Rumble today. The reason for that is this is not Restream anymore. This is actually, we're back to StreamYard. This is StreamYard that is podcasting for YouTube at the moment, because I got rid of the Restream because of too many buggy issues. So please do let me know how things look and sound right now, as I've switched everything over to Restream. Or I've switched everything from Restream, I should say, to StreamYard. Although Restream clawed and begged. They offered me 20% off. They offered me, they made shorts out of some of my podcasts and threw them up on YouTube to try to entice me to stay. But I had been thrown off or lost audio or was out of sync or had other buggy problems too many times. And so, yeah, now I'm on StreamYard. So hopefully everything looks and sounds good. I'll just wait for somebody to let me know. Puck, there's Puck. He says, you didn't read my comment. What comment? Because I didn't see. This is the first I've seen of you, Puck. Frankie and Cyberjack says, looks and sounds great. And here's Bob from the UK, joining us here today. So hopefully everything is going well. We're going to go ahead and start jumping off into the news. Jesse says, all sounds good. Good. It should be in 1080. And the audio quality should be decent. And I'll go back and I'll listen to it later on. But again, I can't podcast. I can't go on to Restream through StreamYard for some reason. And Puck says, oh, he's talking about the list, the infamous list. Yeah, because and I have that pulled up. I have something about that pulled up. Another thing that people said Trump would never do. Yeah, the list is coming public. The list, you know what I mean? The famous list of flight logs has coming along. That's what David is asking. Has Bondi released the flight logs yet? I don't know if they're fully released yet, but it's coming down the pipe. Again, something that people said Trump was not going to do. I talked about this yesterday. Oh, Trump isn't going to do this, that, or the other. And this was on his list, and it's coming. It's coming. They've got it, and it's on its way out. And people said that he wasn't going to do it because of his association, but his association consists of, I think, a meeting in 2003, and evidently Trump didn't like the guy and didn't want to deal with him. So there you go. Raccoon has joined us. Again, we are on StreamYard today. We're back to StreamYard, as we get ready to share the first element here. Let me see. Here we go. And hopefully this will do right. Here we go. That's the old way. That's what I remember. In case, I'm sure this has been circulating everywhere, and I just wanted to cycle through it really quick. ABC News: Gene Hackman, wife and dog found dead in home under suspicious circumstances. And it's really weird if you read this. It says an investigation is underway after actor Gene Hackman, 95, and his wife Betsy Arakawa, 64, were mysteriously found dead alongside of a dog in their Santa Fe, New Mexico home. Now, apparently, they have been dead for some time. They're decomposing in that house. And people surmised, oh, maybe there was a gas leak, maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning. No evidence of it. They've already had the utility companies out there searching the house. No evidence of that. And there's 3 dogs. 2 of them are still alive. He's found on the floor in the mudroom or the foyer, and he was found dead in the mudroom and on the floor, and she was found laying on the floor in the bathroom. So they don't know what happened, or they're not telling us. And Sven said Trump kicked Epstein out of his property. And Kimberly says, yeah, Trump shut him down real quick. Peter says, remember, there's a lot of victims and informants that need to be withheld, and there are tens of thousands of documents to go through. Of course. And yeah, Peter says carbon monoxide poisoning, ? That's what they initially thought, but they can't find any evidence of that. And again, there's 2 dogs that are still alive. 1 dead and 2 alive. So they still don't know, or they're not telling us. They say that they can't find any evidence of foul play. I think that's down here in this particular article. If I come down, Santa Fe City Fire Department found no signs of possible carbon monoxide leak or poisoning. New Mexico Gas Company responded. There's no signs of evidence. Maintenance worker who initially responded to the home found the front door open, according to the search warrant affidavit, but there were no signs of forced entry and no items taken or rummaged through. Manner and cause of death are not known. Sheriff's office says currently no foul play suspected. And so, that's a big thing that's circulating right now. A lot of people know who Gene Hackman is, or was, as the case may be. And that's running around on social media. He's been retired for quite some time. He's one of the few actors that retired and stayed that way. Said he was done with acting and walked away, and there you go. But since it was brought up, we'll go ahead and bring it up. Here comes the Epstein files, Evening Standard, or the Prelude, I should say. And Monkey's joined us. Glad you could make it today, Monkey, as well as James. Thanks for popping in. Evening Standard, Jeffrey Epstein's files are set to be released today. And Pam Bondi says, this will make you sick. I don't know if it'll make me sick, but it'll sure make a lot of people pretty angry when they see the names that are on it, I'm sure. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi has confirmed plans to release fresh information about people associated with Epstein. The Trump-appointed representative who assumed the role in February told reporters, that her office will release a number of documents this week, including flight logs and a lot of names. Quote, I think tomorrow you're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office. This will make you sick. She added, stopping short of revealing any further details. It comes after she was quizzed about when she would release a list of Epstein clients after facing mounting pressure from the press as well as fellow lawmakers. Quote, it's sitting on my desk right now for review. That's been a directive by President Trump. Earlier, lawmakers from across the spectrum demanded Bondi release documents, with some questioning why she continued to sit on the information. Pam Bondi is sitting on the Epstein files right now. What are you waiting for? The social media profile for the Senate Judiciary Democrats wrote alongside images of Trump with Epstein in Ghislaine Maxwell. Is it Ghislaine Maxwell? Yeah, because as Trump admitted to, yeah, he met him, and I believe it was 2003 or 2006, and didn't care for him, didn't care for the guy, didn't want to do business with him. Representative Ilhan Omar, because God knows she's so trustworthy, wrote on her social media, the AG still not releasing the Epstein files is weird and raises the question of who she might be protecting. It's not an issue of protecting anybody. Well, and if you are protecting anybody, obviously, it would be people who were victimized that don't want to be on blast. Tuck liked Hackman's work. Flukeman says, hello, everyone. Forgot about today's podcast. Was going to watch something else, but fortunately, ST showed me when opening the app. Wow, somebody saw. I hope somebody saw. Puck says, why would anyone murder Hackman? Never mind his wife and dog. Who knows? Nobody knows what's going on yet. And Carrick has joined us. Joe says they always try to smear Trump showing his photo with Epstein when there is literally a picture of them with the Pope and staying at Queen of England, Scotland's farmhouse. Yeah, I mean, when you're a celebrity of that standard, and people don't realize, go back and look. And I've mentioned this before. One of the things my wife and I like to do is watch vintage game shows. We watch game shows from the 70s and the 80s. I can't tell you how often we're watching a game show, Press Your Luck or whatever, right? And one of the trivia questions involves Donald Trump. Even back then, he was massively significant as a socialite and a celebrity. People knew who he was. The guy got around. He's going to bump into people he's not going to like. He's going to be seen with someone that maybe somewhere down the line, 20 or 30 years later, it'll be like, oh, what were you doing with that guy? And it's like, I don't know. I met him once. It's going to happen. Fluke Man wants to know if Hackman is okay. No, Hackman didn't get carbon monoxide poisoning. Hackman and his wife and family dog are dead and have been dead for days. They found their bodies. They don't know how they died yet. It's been kicked around. Maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning, but there was no evidence of it, according to the fire marshal. Yeah, that's what Joe says here. There are pics of Diddy with literally every celebrity in America because you circulate, you get around, you meet people, people take your picture. It doesn't mean you're pals. It doesn't mean you're business associates or anything else like that. And yeah, there you go. Puck says, give the list to Paul Kersey or Frank Castle. Give it to Frank Castle. It goes on to tell you, excuse me, Epstein is a disgraced businessman and sex offender who frequently brushed shoulders with celebrities and the world elite and took his own life in 2019 while awaiting trial. Yeah, that's well within question. That is well within question whether or not Epstein actually, I mean, there is now the term he Epsteined himself to refer to somebody who's been shut down. I really seriously question whether or not Epstein actually terminated his own life as opposed to being disposed of. I'm sure most people feel that way. I'm sure most people feel that way about it. Anyways, there you are. There you are. So it's coming down the line. It's one of the other promises that Trump made that people said he wasn't going to do, and here it comes. If it hasn't been released publicly already as of the time of my pulling up the articles for today, this is where we were at. Pam Bondi says, yeah, I've got it on my desk. We're ready to go. And we're going to release as many names and as much information as we possibly can. So yeah, I'm ready for it. And if they do release any kind of a definitive list, I'll pull it up tomorrow and I'll read it. I'll read it on the podcast so that ScrewTube can get mad at me, because they're mad at me all the time anyway. They're always mad at me, and it's okay. I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. No, not that kind of lumberjack, although I have cut down trees before. Monkey hopes it isn't just a bunch of black lines. Yeah, I know, redacted. She said there would be names. There would Be a lot of names. I think that's in the quote. Things jumping all over the place. You're going to see some Epstein information being released by my office. This will make you sick. It's sitting on my desk right now. That's been a directive by President Trump. And there will be a lot of names and other information released finally. Joe wants to know if they caught all the South Carolina lab monkeys. Last I heard, there were still 6 at large. But, I haven't heard anything about it for a few weeks. But that there were still, the last time I found one of those stories about the laboratory monkeys, there were still 6 on the 6 on the run, on the loose. And David wants to know what evidence was destroyed prior to Trump getting into office. God knows. God knows, because stuff sure did disappear or was denied. That is true. That is true. And Undercover Ruski has joined us. Glad you could make it today. And Raccoon suggests the list won't change anything. These people are untouchable. It sure does seem that way, doesn't it? And isn't that disheartening? Isn't that disheartening? And I've heard rumors about names that are on that list, like Oprah Winfrey, Tom Hanks, prominent Hollywood people that have been allegedly to that island, actually been to the island, meeting with him or having a meeting with him or whatever. Even Bill Gates met with him. And I think Bill Gates met with him a couple of times, but I don't know that it's ever been suggested Bill Gates went there. You see what I'm saying? Prince Harry. There's a lot of names on there. And Coffee Girl is here. Glad you could make it today. Happy Thursday indeed. Thursday indeed. But that'd be very interesting. I know a lot of people have been upset about that, but really they just want the gossip. They just want the gossip. JJ suggests that Biden himself might have been on that island. Who knows? Who knows? He was a weird guy. He was a weird guy. And John has joined us. Cat Shepherd, he says. I have a cat. Let me see. Somebody is in the room. I didn't announce her. There's Miss Kitty. Flopped out on the floor like she was going somewhere and just fell out. Right, Miss Kitty? You ignoring me? She's ignoring me, everybody. It's all right. I'm used to it. Cats do that to you. They don't all respond. They don't all respond when you call them. As we shift around here, and we're going to shift to eggs. We're going to go from islands to eggs, as is suggested in the thumbnail. Got a few more things to say about the egg problem, the egg crisis. We're in an egg crisis again. And it says, CBS News article, U.S. officials walk back plans for bird flu. So it's been recommended, of course, the USDA quit killing them all. And they were thinking about it, and then they were like, nah, we're going to kill them anyway. And they're just looking at this picture. These leghorns look so unhealthy. Look how filthy they are. That's awful. It says U.S. Department of Agriculture officials said on Wednesday that there are no anticipated changes to the current federal policy requiring poultry to be culled in response to bird flu outbreaks, which have driven up egg prices to record highs in recent months. Remember, we read the article last week. Okay, this is important. Read the article, no, 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. I think it was who has 1.6 million chickens on his farm. Remember, 1.6 million leghorns producing 1.2 million eggs a day. Who's terrified because he said if the USDA comes out, if they find a single chicken with bird flu, he will be forced to destroy the entire flock and start from scratch. He'll be forced to cull all of them for one. And this is how we've gotten to where we are. And again, I will remind you, I don't recall ever seeing stories like this growing up. It's only within the last decade I've heard about them killing flocks of chickens like this. And Bernab has joined us. Thanks for coming in today. It says the decision marks a rebuke of an idea floated by the Trump administration officials in recent weeks to change that policy. Trump, the obvious thing, quit killing them all. Let the flu run its course. You're not going to catch it from an egg. You're not going to catch it from eating the meat. It doesn't work like that. Okay? That's not how it works. Stop killing them. If the flu runs through, maybe you'll lose 10% of your flock to the sickness, clean it up, and keep going. Minor setback. No, you got to wipe them all out because we have one, maybe a positive test, maybe one. It says the decision was a rebuke of an idea by the Trump administration officials in recent weeks to change that policy. More than 35 million birds have been killed in response to bird flu outbreaks in commercial flocks so far this year under the USDA guidelines. So you're telling me since January, the USDA has ordered the nullification of 35 million birds? Are you shitting me? And they don't want to stop that policy. Joe has 26 chickens. There you go, Joe. And he points out, of course, wild birds are not dropping dead. No, they're not. No, they're not. And Peter says they're eliminating a cheap source of animal protein, part of the larger plan to weaken the masses. Yeah, they want us all eating bugs. David says if farmers destroy chickens, doesn't the government pay the farmer above market price? I've never heard that. I've heard people float that idea, but I've never seen anything specific on that to verify that the government reimburses them for those animals, for the birds. But that doesn't, still, even if they were reimbursed for those chickens, that's not going to help the price of either poultry or eggs. And Bernard wants to know what's up with the measles outbreak. Measles outbreak, one person died in Texas. That's the outbreak. We read that story yesterday. They said there's 124 people in Texas that have tested positive, including people who have had the vaccination for it. And that one girl died, and it's the first time, I think, since 2015 that anybody died from it in the United States. That's your outbreak. Joe says they've killed close to 1 billion birds since 2020. And Tuck suggests it's sabotage. And Sven, 35 million, and they're still doing it. It's really horrible. It says the decision. Okay, I read that part. The Biden plan was to just kill chickens, and they spent billions of dollars randomly killing chickens within a parameter where they found a sick chicken, according to Kevin Hassett, director of the White House's Economic Council. The U.S. and most other countries have a stamping out policy for bird flu in order to comply with standards that underpin international poultry exports from the World Organization for Animal Health, or WOA. I didn't know there was a WOA. No anticipated changes to our current stamping out policy at this time, and we will continue to follow WOA guidelines, according to the USDA. Well, that's not following WOA guidelines if you are stamping them out and the rest of the world doesn't do it. Biden administration officials have defended the culling approach as the best way to contain outbreaks and cut down on unnecessary suffering of poultry birds who are likely to otherwise die prolonged deaths from the disease anyway. Are they? I wonder what it would have been like if they had followed that policy with COVID. Oh, somebody's got it. We're going to have to wipe out this neighborhood. Sorry about that. Get the flamethrowers. And Joe says abolish the USDA and the FDA. And Peter says, and the ATF. No kidding. FDA, you could thank Franklin, not Franklin, who was it? Theodore Roosevelt. You can thank Theodore Roosevelt for the Food and Drug Administration. He formed it after he was offended by reading Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and reading about the meat processing practices. Because, of course, he was in the Spanish-American War. And in that book, it suggested more people in the Spanish-American War died from contaminated tinned meat than actually getting shot. Flukeman says he knew Trump told them bloody stop being pussies. Trump has a common sense and general knowledge, or at least he got advice from actual professionals, not those graduated from the University of TikTok. Yeah, I mean, basically, stop killing them. The stamping out process, it doesn't work. And what happened back in the day when, and then they go on to try to talk about vaccinating for it. And it's like, yeah, okay, I really trust that. I trust that idea. Yeah, let me go ahead and get poked for bird flu. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And we're one of the only countries on earth doing this. Other countries, if there is a bird flu in the flock, they just let it go through. Plus, the way these animals live, what do you expect? Of course, they're going to get sick. But once again, you're not going to catch it from eating the meat. You're not going to catch it from eating the eggs. That's not how it works. So it's pointless. And since they refuse to, USDA, even though Trump administration has asked them to stop this policy, until they get to a position where maybe he has to make an executive order and push the USDA. Maybe by the time DOGE gets around to USDA, they'll back off. The only other alternative they have is, in my opinion, really kind of a strange one. And as we get into, what is this, a Fox Business article? Trump administration unveils key strategy to immediately bring down record high egg prices. What are you going to do? What did the thumbnail tell you? We're going to import them. There you go. Let's bring in eggs from somewhere else. While record high egg prices have left Trump officials scrambling for a solution to bring down costs, wah wah, pun intended, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins floated options to immediately reduce money spent on the dietary staple. Well, we're looking at importing some eggs in the short term, she said from the White House lawn on Wednesday. Okay, so it's cheaper now to bring them across the southern border than it is to just collect them in the United States. Gotcha. And we're talking to several countries around the world that can get us eggs right away. This would not be a long-term fix, but to immediately begin to bring those prices down from around the world. Listen, if it's not coming from a bordering country, and guess what? A bordering country that doesn't cull flocks, and that's why they have so many. Maybe that's why. This is your solution. The fourth pillar of a five-pronged approach to alleviating some of the cost burden importing eggs is just a portion of a more all-encompassing plan that entails deregulation, investments in biosecurity. That means vaccinations. Repopulating fowl and investing in vaccines and therapeutic research. Therapeutic research, how about you let those birds out of the pens once in a while so they don't go insane? How about that, therapeutic research? You know what that makes me think of? That reminds me of a story. Yeah, we're going to have story time here in a moment. Coffee Girl says, in my area, stores have shortages on eggs, but not on certain chicken meat. Are they processing the meat for sale? No, they bury them. When they cull those flocks, they bury them. They don't use that. They don't use that meat at all. Monkey says, so instead of getting an immediate solution, you get the solution to import. Come on, Trump, get on the USDA. No kidding. No kidding. But the story that reminds me of, because it says here, what was it? Therapeutic research. Therapeutic research for the chickens. Is that what we're doing? When I was still living in the Boston area, in Allston, There was a pet store. I don't know if it's still there or not. It's called the Alston Pet Shop on Harvard Ave in Alston. I don't know if it still exists. This guy had a collection of exotic birds. All right, back in the day, because this is in the early 90s, when exotic birds were still exotic. You didn't see big South American birds and cockatiels and big red parrots and stuff in the United States unless you were in a zoo. They cost a fortune. This guy had a collection of them. And you could go in the back room. You couldn't buy them, but you could go in the back room and see them. Okay. And I was in there once. I think it was a Wednesday. I remember specifically because of how he worded it. And I was like, can't see the birds today. And he says, no, they're with the therapist right now. It's Wednesday is therapy day for the birds, because he has an animal psychologist that specializes in birds that would go into his back room on Wednesday to work with his exotic birds, right? And I said, you need an animal psychologist for the birds? And he was like, yeah, the birds are depressed. And I told him I would be depressed too if I was in a cage that I couldn't even spread my wings in. And he got mad. But isn't that kind of the point? These are birds. These are not birds that were born here. Again, back in the 90s, when people were still paying like $25,000 for one of these birds because they were captured in the rainforest and smuggled here and sold. So you took an animal from the rainforest, clipped their wings, stuck them in a little cage, and you wonder why they're depressed, and you need an animal psychologist. Seriously. You can see now I have a history of pissing people off, by the way, because he's sure to get upset with me. Joe says they also want to do this to push plant and engineered lab meat. Yeah, and fake eggs, powdered like plant-based eggs. Plant-based eggs! It's not eggs. Okay, call it something else. Yeah, raccoon hates seeing birds in cages. It's depressing. It's depressing for them too. And Fluke Man suggests, of course, he says the chicken farms to stop cramming so many of them in the Amazon-sized warehouses. Yeah, because it put like 500,000 in one pen. And it makes them sick. It's terribly unsanitary. People who walk around in those places have to wear what's the term I'm looking for? Respirators in order to breathe properly, because it's not safe. It's not safe to breathe that. So we jump from eggs to the Pentagon and talk some more about how your tax dollars have been getting spent, especially under the not the Trump administration, the Biden administration, excuse me. Washington Examiner, Pentagon spent millions injecting DEI into science and medicine. I don't think that's the Pentagon's job. What do you think? The Department of Defense spends millions of dollars every year on expanding diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in science and healthcare. A review of public records have found. From improving racial equality in prostate cancer treatment to increasing diversity in marine mammal research, the Washington Examiner has identified $18.4 million in Pentagon grants aimed at inserting DEI into technical fields. While the earliest instance of this spending in federal databases dates back to the Obama administration, most of the grants were distributed under the Biden administration, and a significant number of these diversity commitments remained under the Trump administration. Seriously? Racial equality in prostate cancer treatment? I mean, when you go to the doctor and he puts the glove on, does he treat you different if you're black? Seriously? This is what we're spending our tax dollars on. This is what we're spending our tax dollars on, huh? Increased diversity in marine mammal research. There are not enough Chinese guys examining whales. Is that it? Seriously? It says research and development spending in the Department of Defense contains large sums of money being spent on non-defense spending. Centers of Excellence, sponsored as pork spending by congressmen, never requested by the Pentagon, and politicized initiatives like DEI and climate change. Wilson Beaver, Heritage Foundation National Security Policy Advisor, tells the Washington Examiner, quote, this sort of spending needs to be cut and reallocated into the procurement of weapons systems like ships, planes, and munitions that our troops need to protect the national security interests of the United States. So far, the Department of Government Efficiency cuts to the Pentagon have been limited to a handful of contracts funding diversity training and subscriptions to information services such as Politico, Pro, and Westlaw. The largest single STEM DEI item funded by the Pentagon was an inclusive cancer care research equity for Black Men Consortium. That's a mouthful. That's the name of the operation. Inclusive Cancer Care Research Equity for Black Men Consortium, which is a group of universities and healthcare organizations that have received over $10 million in military funding to optimize prostate cancer treatment specifically for Black men. I think if a Black guy goes to his general practitioner and needs a prostate exam, they're not going to tell him, sorry, brother, I can't help you. You're too dark. Nobody's going to do that. Nobody is going to do that. Jericho says, what the hell was that administration thinking? Isn't the Pentagon meant for military defense? Essentially. That's what it's supposed to be for. Peter says they were making fake eggs and selling them as real eggs when I was living in China. Were they? I know they make counterfeit rice and counterfeit cooking oil. I've seen those stories. But this is what the Pentagon has been doing with its surplus money. That makes no sense at all. No sense at all. And those radical programs need to be shut down. They need to be shut down. They need to be stopped. There's some more waste of tax dollars. Fox News article coming up, and we're going to jump from Washington, D.C. to Texas. A Texas nonprofit, to be more specific. And this nonprofit has been ripping off government funding. DOGE says that a Texas nonprofit with former Biden transition member, reaped millions operating an empty facility. Nobody's there. It says Department of Health and Human Services has terminated a contract with a nonprofit that was paid millions each month to operate a Texas overflow facility that sat empty, according to the Department of Government Efficiency. In a social media post, DOGE said a former U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement employee and Biden transition team member joined Family Endeavors in 2021, where they helped the organization secure a sole source HHS contract for overflow housing from licensed care facilities. As a result, Family Endeavors cash and portfolio of investments grew from $8.3 million in 2020 to $520.4 million in 2023 for operating an empty building. That's a big jump. 8.3 to 500 to $500 million, just over $500 million in 3 years. Since March 2024, HHS has paid $18 million per month to keep a facility in Pecos, Texas, used for housing for unaccompanied migrant children that was previously at the center of reports of poor conditions. The payment continued despite the facility being empty, according to DOGE. With national licensed facility occupancy now below 20%, HHS was able to terminate this contract, saving taxpayers over $215 million a year. Can they claw any of that money back since this building is empty? Can they get that money back? $8.3 million to $520 million in 3 years for doing literally nothing, having a building available. Brian wants us to raise our hand if we're sick of the racist card. No kidding. The term doesn't even mean anything anymore. It gets thrown around so much it's lost its meaning. Jericho wants to know where the hell are all these unaccompanied migrant kids? You hear about them, but you don't see them. Who knows what the hell happened to them, where they are, or what's going on, or if they ever even existed. I mean, I'm sure there were some, but not as many as it's been alluded to. Not as many as there have been alluded to. But yeah, it's a good question. If there were as many as they claim, where the hell did they go? Did they sneak back? Did they go back where they came from? Puck says this won't stop until people are in jail. Well, we'll see. We'll see if we get to that point. But there's no excuse for this. And this is just one example. This is just one example of waste and fraud. And it's your money. It's your money. And while we're at it, may as well look at some more waste and fraud. And we're going to jump to South Carolina. We're going to jump to South Carolina here. Associated Press article coming up. 3 councilmen in South Carolina's third largest city charged in bribery and kickback schemes. 3 members of the city council in South Carolina's third largest city accepted kickbacks and bribes to give out grant money and rezone land, or lied about what they knew, according to federal prosecutors Wednesday. Charges against North Charleston councilman Jerome Hayward, Sandino Moses, and Mike Brown, along with 5 others, were announced Wednesday after a year-long investigation by the FBI. It says Hayward took $40,000 in kickbacks from 2 nonprofit organizations in return for steering them part of a $1.3 million grant to fight gun violence in North Charleston. Yeah, and it's funny how whenever this sort of thing happens, there's always a charity or a nonprofit associated with it. You notice that? It's not just these politicians. There's always charities and nonprofits affiliated with a lot of this misappropriation of funds. Hayward and Brown were part of a scheme by a boat maker to rezone land on the Ashley River in North Charleston that was once a hospital and before that a fertilizer plant, to sell to a boat manufacturer. The company offered to build a park, but also wanted a plant on the site. The councilman accepted bribes to try to get the rezoning passed, and by the time the FBI was listening to Hayward's calls, catching Brown saying he was annoyed it was taking too long to get his money because he needed to pay for his son's wedding. Oh, Moses also took money to support rezoning. He returned it, but then he lied about the offer and what he knew about his fellow councilman being on the take, according to the charging documents. Hayward is charged with extortion, bribery, and wire fraud. Brown is charged with bribery and wire fraud, and Moses is charged with lying to federal investigators. Hayward and Moses plan to plead guilty to charges Friday, according to U.S. Attorney for South Carolina, Brooke Andrews. So it's actually 8 people that are involved in this. They don't name the other 5. Taking bribes from nonprofit organizations to allocate government funds. Incredible. James says he saw a great bumper sticker today, Make America John Wayne Again. There you go. And Jericho says that's why I never donate. No, never donate, because you can't trust any of these charities. You don't know what the hell's going on. There's always fraud. You know what? I don't know. Are these guys Democrats or Republicans? That I'm not sure about. Because usually it tells you stuff like that. Let me see if I can find out. Jerome Hayward is the first guy. Jerome Hayward. Let me see. He's a city councilman. Jerome Hayward. Okay. I don't know what his... I found him, but it doesn't say. I found a picture of him. But it doesn't say what his political. It's not a very flattering picture either. It doesn't say what his political affiliation is. Let me pull it up anyway so you can see what I'm looking at. Because in my experience, again, and you've heard me say it a million times, the majority of the time, what is this? The majority of the time when you're talking about, well, the picture disappeared. That's some crap. When you're talking about this kind of corruption, it's usually a Democrat lawmaker. And so I was just curious if he was Democrat, Republican, or independent. I'd be shocked if he was anything but a Democrat, because usually, yeah, that's Jerome Hayward. He's the ringleader of the South Carolina corruption investigation. He's the guy. But there you go. Don't know if he's a Democrat or not, but it doesn't say. It does not specify. But like I said, usually they tell you if it's a Democrat or a Republican in the stories, but I didn't see it. Speaking of fraud again, we're going to jump to Minnesota. Only this time it's a denial of fraud. Oh, no, there's no fraud here. Because apparently they haven't forgotten about Tampon Tim that easily. Washington Examiner article. The new Minnesota House Speaker denounces that there was record fraud under Walz's leadership. No, it didn't happen. Minnesota's new House Speaker, Lisa DeMuth, said combating fraud is a top priority of the legislator, and she blamed Governor Tim Walz for allowing it to get so bad. Really? It says, where are we here? There's been record fraud over the last 6 years with Governor Walz at the helm of the state. DeMuth, a Republican, said in an interview with Politico, there hasn't been any serious consideration given to stopping that fraud. Oh, so it's just the wording. So she's denouncing his record fraud, not denouncing that there was fraud. That's bad syntax on the part of Elaine Mallon, the person who wrote this article. She should have been more direct in the title. So here we go. Minnesota faces problems with fraud. There's been approximately $610 million worth of fraud in the state in the past 6 years, including a scheme that siphoned government funding meant to feed low-income children. I remember that reading about those articles when Tim Walz was running for vice president. Walz signed an executive order in January creating a fraud investigation unit and announced a legislative package to prevent, detect, investigate, and penalize fraud in state programs. So he wrote an executive order to enforce what was already a law anyways, because fraud obviously is not permitted, and exposing it is already a priority of law enforcement in Minnesota anyways. But what has he done to expose his blocking of the investigation of the fraud of that government funding for low-income food for children? Because he blocked it. That's why, that was what was in the articles we read last time. It says, still, DeMuth accused the state government of not taking enough steps to address the abuse and said that now with Republicans in charge, things will be different. Maybe, maybe not. With having a Republican chair at the helm of the fraud committee, we're able to have hearings as necessary and then potentially move policy through to stop that. So you want to have meetings. Great. DeMuth was selected to lead the Minnesota House earlier this month after a weeks-long power struggle between Democrats and Republicans came to a close. We all know that he was involved with that. Puck says the Islamic Republic of Minnesota. Correct. Flukeman says, can Trump take legal action from the corrupt politicians, freeze assets, sell properties, and etc.? Through the proper channels, if it can be demonstrated that they got anything, if they received any financial support or large gifts, for example, that can be taken away in any kind of a fraud examination. The asset forfeiture applies even to a politician if it can be proven that they benefited illegally. So yeah. Joe says Ilhan Omar married her brother and her father committed Issac genocide. Peter said Jerome Hayward was accused of racism also a while ago. Was he? Well, he's not above corruption anyways. He's not above corruption. So yeah, Tampon Tim forgot all about him. Forgot all about Timmy Boy when Harris lost the presidency run. But he seemed even more corrupt than she did. All of the fraud, I mean, every bit of fraud that you could find, big fraud on the government level, somehow Tim was tied to it and blocked the investigation as governor. And we're not supposed to be suspicious of this guy? Never mind all of his connections to China. More than 30 trips to China. His first job was in China. His honeymoon was in China. And we're not supposed to be suspicious of his interactions with the Chinese government? Yeah, I don't trust that. And it should be investigated, but just because she's a Republican doesn't mean anything. And then Tim showboating, signing a law. Big deal. Signing a law, an executive order that here it is, prevent, detect, investigate, and penalize fraud in state programs with their fraud investigations unit. That's something that they're supposed to be doing anyways. And I hate it when they come out and they say, oh, we came out with this new law, or we came out with this new regulation, and it just showboats something that they already should be doing anyways. It's just talking points. It doesn't mean anything. They should have already been doing that. They should have already been doing that. Tim was pathetic, though. Tim reminded me, he looked like the principal from Beavis and Butthead. Tim Waltz. Deer in the headlights look on that guy's face all the time, too. Deer in the headlights look on that guy's face. He always looks shocked. And then the whole bit with him with the shotgun. That was hilarious. You remember Tim with the shotgun, the man's man. The backwoodsman. He's supposed to be a hunter and a fisherman and all this other stuff. Can't load a shotgun. Can't load a shotgun. Absolutely incredible. He never should have allowed for that photo shoot to take place. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. Kimberly says nose candy can make you look that way. Yeah, he's too fat for that. Tim Waltz is shaped like Curly Howard. So here we go. We're going to take a look really quickly at the national debt clock to see where we are at with DOGE, since it is now part of this clock. DOGE is currently at $143 billion, $143,862,000,000 and counting. It'll hit 144 in the next couple of hours. It had a big jump over the weekend. It slowed down a little bit today because I think it was at 140 yesterday, correct? Again, usdebtclock.org, really interesting tool. Jericho says if it's already a law, why isn't it already being enforced? Exactly. And Brian says, I saw a video on a so-called veteran on CNN who couldn't even hold or aim a rifle properly. But, yeah, and Tuck says that was funny. I've never ever seen one of those shotguns except in a video. Never held an auto loader in my life, but I could still load one properly. It takes 5 minutes to read the manual. Timmy, yeah. And it wasn't even an auto loader. It was just a standard. Well, I'm not sure, actually, off the top of my head, what type of shotgun it was. Was it an auto loader? It was still bottom fed. And he still couldn't load the breech. He was holding, for those of you who aren't familiar with what we're talking about, he had the butt of the shotgun in his crotch with the breech facing down and was trying to load the shells up into it, which is ridiculous. You put the butt under your arm, sling the rifle down, upside down, and load the breech down in. And he's standing there struggling with it, holding it against his groin and trying to put shells up under it. And I'm like, please pull that trigger by accident. Please let there be one in the chamber. You'd have seen Tim rolling around on the ground for 20 minutes. And Tuck says he thinks it was a Beretta. Okay. But that was hilarious. It was pathetic is what it was. And it's like, you're the outdoorsman. You were in the military. You were in the military how many years? Men under my command can't load a shotgun. And it's pretty, I mean, you can look at the thing. A shotgun is actually pretty simple to operate. I like shotguns just for the same reason I like revolvers. They're really simple mechanisms that are easy to maintain and easy to operate. And they can function dirty because there's not as many moving parts. Just like a Kalashnikov, an AK-47, can run dirty. You can bury that thing in the mud and then take it out and fire it because it's almost one-piece construction. It's real simple. Simple is better sometimes when it comes to firearms if you're in a dirty situation. A revolver, a shotgun, they just freaking work. But as long as he can't load it, doesn't know how, some outdoorsman he turned out to be. And David says, think he could load a single shot? No. No, he can't. Brian says, problem is AK-47 inaccurate. Yeah, if you're going for distance. If you're trying to fire at distance, you're better off with an AR-15 style rifle. But if you have shorter distances, it's a nail driver. It's a nail driver. And like I said, they run dirty. But with that, we are at the top of the hour, so I will go ahead and start signing off. Again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk. Oh, and special thanks to Anne, who made a donation to the channel for the cats through our PayPal. Thank you, Anne. Much appreciated. But again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta, and Rumble on Coffee Talk 2. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation. And we will catch you again tomorrow.